This video is about how to write licks, which are short bits of music. This can be applied to any instrument, although these examples are particularly tailored to guitar. This is kind of tailored more towards beginners as well, but there's a lot in here that I think even some seasoned veterans might need a little bit of reminding of. So let's start with some basics. Big number one, you do not need to know all of music to be able to write or play music. It's a big misconception that you have to go to school to be able to write these kind of things. The short answer is you don't. Anyone can do it. All you have to do is try. The second thing is, a simple chord just strummed differently can produce a lot of different sounds. So depending on what you want to write, something as simple as a chord could be a lick for you in your piece. Again, chords are important, but they're not the only thing that happens on a guitar. Single notes can be just as impactful and beautiful when used in the right way. And last but not least, you're allowed to use any notation you find to be helpful for remembering a beat, for writing it down at first. And even when it comes time to transcribe it, if it's something that you find helpful, don't let anyone tell you that you have to change that. It can be as simple as you want it to be and as complex as you need it to be. Most examples that I'm going to use in any of my following videos, and this video in particular, are going to use the open position. The open position is generally the first position we learn. It's the one that happens here, generally in these first three frets. It's going to be most major open chords like E, A, G, B, and all of the respective ones in between. Generally, music is defined by steps and how many steps are in between each beat or note. When you tap something out or kind of think of something in your head, generally you can tell if something's going to be pitching up, so it's going to be getting higher pitched, or if something's going to get lower pitched, you'll know it and you'll be able to tell based on how it sounds to you when you're thinking of it. I apologize, the plane is flying overhead. So music, when we write notation, is defined by steps. Steps are kind of what differentiate a note from another, whether it's one step, a half step, or two steps up. Each beat and every single note is going to be divided by one of these uniform intervals. That's going to be how all notation is broken up and how it is defined. So even this most simple beat change, it's a half step up, half step back down. And in reverse, it's half step down and then half step back up. Knowing these things on the guitar called scales allow us to classify our beats into one of them. I'd say generally the open scales are the easiest ones to use. They're also the easiest ones to improvise with. I find them to be very helpful. Even if something kind of exists outside of this specific range of sounds, like this key in particular, you're still able to transpose it into this key because all of music is always just separated by these same uniform steps. So if I know that my sound is, I could play that sound in really any key that I'd like, and I'm still going to have the same sound. I'm going to play an example of an ascending scale in the open position, which is the first three frets. And the same scale stepping back down. All scales are just a set series of notes that establish a uniform interval to allow you to transpose what you want to write onto the scale and transcribe it into what exists on the guitar as one of those series. On a piano and on many other instruments this is much more simple, but in the guitar the scales only establish the uniform change in steps between the notes. So regardless of which scale you end up learning first, any of them will do, because all they are is just that uniform set of notes that allow you to understand them based on their intervals and the pitch in between them. So like we said, regardless of the beginning position, the sound is going to stay the same. So you don't need to learn all of the keys on the guitar to get started. As long as you know one scale in any position, you're going to be able to write music and correlate what's on the guitar to what you're thinking in your head. Little solo bits are going to always exist in one scale. I think personally that there's more exceptions to that rule than there is examples, but generally things exist within one key. This is an example of a scale in the open position. I will put up a tab of what this looks like. I'm going to play it for you here. Here's a quick example of chords stepping up and then back down, and then a single note stepping up and back down. But the first example we're going to see here is tabs. Tabs aren't as effective as other types of notation because they fail to show the transition between the notes. It's hard to tell when you just look at a tab whether the beats are ascending or descending, and what sounds they're actually going to make when played. Next up is traditional notation. This is the kind of notation that's typically shared between different instruments and is not something that's exclusive to any of them, although the notes played and the way they're specifically written on the lines may vary a little bit instrument to instrument. The last notation we're going to show here is a freehand notation. This is not something that's particular to any instrument or to any person. Everyone can do this differently, and this is something you can decide to do or not to do. I do use this sometimes simply when I'm in a rush and I hear a tone that I'd like to mimic later on. I use this simply to show whether I'm stepping up or down and kind of give the most accurate description I can using a single line. This can later be transposed into any other form of music. I can write this up in a tab if I have a guitar sitting next to me, or I can kind of classify this into traditional music scale and traditional notation. I apologize. I only have one lens to film this with, and that means the camera angles are going to be a bit weird. I apologize again also for all of the cutting around. It's kind of weird to shoot this all in one take. I'm not used to it. I am practicing to get better. I just want to show you guys a bit of how a chord can be a lick and how strumming it differently and hand picking can give you a different feel of the same sound. For this example, we're going to be playing A minor. My guitar is tuned a bit differently, as well as the microphone that is built into that camera is not the best. So if this sounds a bit weird, I apologize. I just simply want to show you guys how it's possible to, strum something differently and get a different sound entirely based on, how my left hand affects what my playing is and how my right hand can also change it. So I'm going to just strum the chord with a neutral strum. This neutral strum is just going to be something that happens pretty neutral through the strings. It's not going to be favoring high or low like the next two examples. I'm also strumming without a pick. Pick strumming does give you a lot different sound. Here's an example of a low favored strum and a high. And you can use these in unison and kind of transition through a chord based on using all three of them, and it kind of gives you an interesting sound. So even if all you know is chords, don't shy away. You can still set step ups and downs with just a chord. It's rather easy to do so. It all has to do with your right hand and how you strum. So like I mentioned earlier, you can use single notes to create a beat and a rhythm, or even use for your song. If you don't have much practice yet and you still kind of struggle to transition in between chords, that's perfectly okay. A lot of times you can get away with using one chord for your little bit of a lick. So with an example of single strumming and single picking on a chord, again we'll start with A minor and then we'll shift around a bit using that same shape. So it is very possible to make a pretty intricate beat, step up and down to accommodate whatever it is you'd like to write, with only using minimal changes for your left hand. I will be posting another video soon about how to combine these short little licks into a longer solo and using them in songs. If you'd like to see that, wait around a bit, I'm sure it'll be out soon. I would also like you guys to let me know in the comments if there's anything I can change about this format or anything that you find helpful that other people do. I'm willing to really do anything, and I will read all the comments and do my best to reply to the questions that you guys have. Thanks for watching.